Hi friends, I'm Bex, and today I want to talk to you about some books. Basically, I'm just going to go through a few books that I've read in the past year that I want to recommend. These aren't all the books I read, nor are they even just all the ones that I liked. I just kind of wanted to focus on a few that really stuck out to me, either because I thought they were really impactful, really unique, or they deserved more attention. And on that note, I'm just going to really quickly give a shout out to One Last Stop by McQuiston, which is on the shelf behind me. You can't see it, but it's there. You've probably already heard of this book. It is a queer romance with just like a touch of magical realism set in New York. Excellent book. I also love Red, White, and Royal Blue. I didn't think I was into romance. Turned out I was just not reading the right kind of romance, because McQuiston's queer new adult romances, even though I've only read 2 so far, because 2 exist so far, are like mint. And even if you didn't like Red, White, and Royal Blue, while the style of writing is very similar, if you had some issues with the story, you might still like One Last Stop, because it is quite different. So that's all I'll say about it. Moving on. I actually wanted to talk about a local book. This book is written by somebody who lives, I think still lives in my city, and somebody who also set the story in my city, or some aspects of it are in other parts of the province, but it's set in Nova Scotia. And as you can see, it's called Crocuses Hatch from Snow. Jaime Burnet is the author, and this book was given to me by somebody who happened to have an extra copy. I really didn't know what to expect from this, and it was great. It's just kind of a slice of life kind of book, taking place mostly in the North End. It's queer, and it also kind of goes into, it's focused on this one family of 3 women, a young woman, her mother, and then the grandmother. And the grandmother is dealing with dementia, and she is going kind of back in her memory through, I guess, like growing up, and a romance she had with, a brief romance she had with a Mi'kmaq girl who ended up getting taken away to residential school. And it's just, really a really stunning book. And I don't know what else to say about it. I don't want to like give away too much, because I liked that I went into it knowing nothing, and was surprised by how much I really enjoyed it. So it's kind of like gentrification, family narratives, racism, lots of different things are touched on in a like relatively short novel. I really enjoyed this. Another fiction book I read, which I don't have with me, it's actually a novella, so even shorter. It's called The Root of Ice and Salt. It's by Louis, I think. Jose Luis Zarate. It's a Spanish name, obviously, and the Spanish language writer. This was a translated version I read, obviously. But The Root of Ice and Salt is very unique, because it is a queer retelling of a very specific part of Dracula. And it's a part of Dracula that is not really fully explored in the like Bram Stoker's original novel. And it is about, the main character is the captain of the Demeter, which is the ship that sort of inadvertently gets Dracula to England. And Dracula is, unbeknownst to the crew, in the cargo of this ship. So it's told from the point of view of the ship's captain, who happens to be gay, and he is wrestling with that, having to live with all these men, and there is some reference to like a lost love of his. And of course, if you know Dracula at all, towards the end of the journey, the men start to disappear because, as we know, Dracula is awake and is picking them off in the night. But the crew doesn't know that. They just think that they know something sinister is happening. So it's sort of got like some thriller elements to it. A lot of it is like very dreamy or nightmarish. The captain's always having these very creepy, almost like they start off kind of like almost like sex dreams, but then they like turn into something a lot more sinister. And it's really interesting because there is just so much queerness and just sexuality in vampire tales in general. I think when some of the more like teen vampire romances came out, a lot of the criticisms I heard from young men mostly were like, oh, vampires aren't supposed to be sexy. That's wrong. Vampire stories have always been sexy and have been a way to express queerness, because during a time when it like wasn't okay to be queer, it was very easy to make a queer-coded monster, because because if you wanted to write queer, you could write queer that way, because you always had the defense of like, well, he's like, it's a monster though, so and it really, like, that bit is very much like wrapped up in the narrative of this novella, like who we see as monsters and why. And I don't know, it's really good, and just very like different from anything I read this year. So The Root of Ice and Salt. If you're into vampires, if you want something short, I read it around Halloween time, so it was kind of a nice spooky kind of tale to read around that time, but it wasn't like super intense, gory, in your face horror. It was, I don't know, very poetic, very like the language. It's great, and it's one of the few novels where I read the intro and I read the afterword, and there was like kind of like this essay at the end, and I was so interested in everything about this book that I was like, oh, because sometimes I'll like, I'll skip the forward, I'll skip the afterward unless I really am interested, and or I already love a book and I'll go back to it. This is one where I read it cover to cover. Again, not that it was very long, but great book. Now I'm gonna go into nonfiction. So this is another book that I won't spend too long talking about, I hope, because it's very well known. The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. If you're into true crime, if you have taken any sort of journalism program, you have probably heard about this guy and this book. Now, the thing about this book, which I've owned for several years and have not finished, I did finish it this year, but I tried to read it several years ago, and I was like, God, this is dense, and I put it down and did not look at it for like 6 years maybe. And I think the reason being is I expected it to be fully a true crime book. It's not. It is that, but it's a lot of different things. So it is about the World's Fair in Chicago. H.H. Holmes happens to be a part of that. America's first urban serial killer, I guess, or first known urban serial killer. So in the late 1800s, Chicago set up the World's Fair that took place sometime after the Paris World's Fair. They really wanted to stick it to Paris, but they were not prepared to do so. So it kind of talks about the architects and all these labor issues as well that are intertwined into it, and it also touches on the assassination of the Chicago mayor at the time, which happened at the end of the World's Fair. So there's a lot of stuff wrapped up in there, and I think when I initially started reading it and realized it wasn't just about H.H. Holmes, I was kind of like, oh, this isn't really what I signed up for. Now I'm a lot more interested in things like the labor issues, so I found it really interesting. I kind of took a hybrid approach to reading it. I have the physical book. I also went through and read some parts via audiobook, even sometimes listening and having the book in front of me at the same time, because it is still a really dense book. So I think that having those two ways of going through it was really helpful, and I overall quite enjoyed it. I had some issues with Erik Larson and some of his editorializing, I guess. There were a couple of lines that I was like, excuse me? I think partially in some of the ways that he wrote about women and stuff. But I mean, overall, I can see why people lose it over this book, why people talk about what a masterpiece it is. It's super comprehensive, and the crime parts aren't gory or super in your face. They address the murders, but it's not drawn out. It's not the same as listening to Last Podcast on the Left or something like that. It's a little bit more, I guess. It's still very tragic, but it's not quite as gratuitous, I guess. My other nonfiction recommendation is more of a memoir. I Overcame My Autism and All I Got Was This Lousy Anxiety Disorder by Sarah Kurchak. When I was first looking into autism, Sarah Kurchak was a name that came up a lot. She was diagnosed with autism in her late 20s. She is also Canadian, like me, so I became really interested in her work. She's written about autism a lot, among other things, of course. I have read a few more, I guess, straight nonfiction books, not as memoirish books about autism and neurodivergency. I personally find that I often learn and absorb a lot more from memoir. I think just because the specificity of somebody's experience, to me, can be more helpful, and I feel like I get more out of reading it. Not that not other styles of nonfiction books aren't valuable and don't have their place. I read them as well and will keep reading them. I just find that, I don't know, that there's something about, I love a memoir. Some people are always like, oh, Margaret's oversaturated with memoir. Do we really need another memoir? I really enjoy them. They're among my favorite kinds of books to read, and I think will always be. Kurchak's in particular, I really saw myself in the book. And I think even if you're not autistic, I think that it's just a really wonderful read. She's quite funny as well. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. I went through it pretty quickly. I'm really happy that I own and have it in hard copy. I recommend you go out and buy it and support her. I mean, as I do with all these books, but especially with smaller authors, so to speak, or smaller books. I only know that she wrote a book because I follow her on Twitter, basically. I haven't seen enough about this book. And I really think it deserves more attention. So if you like memoir, maybe check this one out. Okay, that's all the books I had set out to talk about today. I know it was kind of short, but if you want to kind of keep track of the books you read, I recommend Storygraph. I'm on it. I do some like volunteer work for the website, just like little things here and there, dealing with like people's troubleshooting requests and that kind of thing. And it's a really great website. It's better than, you know, the Amazon owned one. And if you want to follow me on there, I'm Beatings there, as I am with most other social media. I can't believe it's November. I've been dealing with so much weird like health stuff in the last little while that I know I kind of fell off the wagon with my regular uploads, but I'm still gonna finish through to December, and then we'll see what happens. But anyway, those are all the specific books I wanted to talk about today. Let me know what you read in this past year so far, and what you really liked, what you really didn't like. And if you want me to talk about more books in the future, please let me know, because I love talking about books. Remember, if you liked this video, please press the like button, comment on the video, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one, and I'll see you sometime in December.